So welcome everyone to Welcome to Debate. I'm Robbie. I've been debating with the U of A for 7 years, and then I did 4 years of high school debate before that. So I've been doing this for a long time. And we're going to start out this session of welcoming you to debate with some basic rules of debating, some expectations that we have of you as debaters, as well as explaining to you the structure and dynamics of a debate round. So in terms of how that structures out as the seminar, first we're going to talk about general rules, then we're going to talk about some terminology that people will throw out at you. It's really useful to define, and then we're going to look at the actual structure and roles of the different speakers in terms of the debate. So before we get into the general rules, I want to make clear that a lot of these are general expectations of debaters. So we are looking not that you are going to do this in your very first debate and do it excellently. These are a lot of lessons that I have learned after 12 years of debating almost. And that these are sort of aspirational things that you want to be constantly looking for in yourself and in others when you're training for debate rounds. So the first one is don't be a jerk. This really needs to be stated explicitly that even though in university we're going to be doing a lot of controversial topics in terms of the debate club, we are never going to put you into a position where you need to be mean to somebody else. So respect your opponents. This means like obvious stuff like no name calling, no like insulting them in the round and stuff. It's just shitty for everyone. Respect yourself as well. We are never going to put you in a position where you should feel like you have to like compromise your own moral values. We will be debating with some topics that people feel strongly about, but we hope that like they are able to be accessed in a sufficiently academic form that you can still debate about them no matter what. And we focus especially on the sort of academic aspects of it so that people can get out of their shell and out of their own experiences with these arguments and make them from the other side as well. It's also really important to respect the people that you're debating about. We deal with a lot of very controversial social issues. Some of the people that you're debating about could be in the room. So treat them with the respect that they deserve. Don't belittle people's choices and make them feel bad. For that, we have an entire equity policy that helps with restorative justice around issues that might come up, hopefully don't. And you'll find more information about that from the executives. I think they probably brought it up right at the beginning of the meeting. That's equity. It's really important. We'll talk more about it at term and some other practices as well. So, first rules. Don't be a jerk. These are the easiest ones. Keep them in mind. The next one, and this is something that's actually really difficult but super critical to debate, is to listen to other people. So, listen to your opponents when they're talking. We are expecting a lot of engagement with other people's arguments in debate rounds. So don't just tune out as soon as you've heard the tagline and ignore all the other things that they're saying, assuming that you know what they're going to say, because you probably don't, and you more often than not, you're going to be surprised by the things that your opponents can come up with on an intellectual level. So make sure you're always listening to your opponents and being ready to clash with the actual things that they said, not just their titles. Also listen to your partner. A lot of debaters get really nervous about their speeches and feel like they need to over-prepare and spend as much time as possible prepping their speech. And their partner's speeches is a great time when they don't have to listen to their opponents to engage with them and clash. So maybe I'll just prep my speech then. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. Your partner is one of the most important people to listen to in the round because we really value team cohesion. We really value teams using their full 14 minutes or 10 minutes of speaking time, not having two separate 5-minute speeches. And so when you can meld them together, you can do a lot more and create better arguments. So listen to your partner, pick up on their vocabulary, pick up on their logic, pick up on their worldview, so you can integrate that into your speech when you make it. Another really useful skill is being able to listen to yourself. A lot of beginners, when they go into a debate, are going to just go on autopilot. And that's going to happen. That's okay. But try and cultivate listening to yourself as you debate. Because if you go, oh, wait a second, that was really dumb. Why did I say that? Can I fix that? We are super lenient about that. If you need to take a pause during your speech where you're like, oh, maybe not. Let's try that again. We are totally okay with that. We would rather you do that because that means that at the end of your speech you're going to have said better things and more intelligent things, and that's what counts. What doesn't count is coming off as perfectly polished. What counts is saying the right things and making the right arguments. Also, listen to others. So one of the great values of joining debate is that you're going to be connected to a social network of people who love talking about issues. So come to social events, add other debaters on Facebook, because we share lots of really cool material that'll give you cool arguments for your cases and improve your ability to engage as a debater with other citizens outside of debate. So be prepared to listen to other people's points of view when you're at other debating events as well. Like If you're listening to people on the television or reading newspapers or magazines, read opposing points of view. They're going to be super helpful for making sure that you can... Is this still recording? Oh, oops. We'll cut that out. So that you can use their arguments in debate rounds when you inevitably have to take their side eventually. Also, debate better. This is one of the big expectations that we have of new debaters. Always try to do your best. You are sometimes going to feel really discouraged by a round. You're going to knock yourself down and say, I can't do this. Always remember that you can. Always remember that we are super friendly. We love helping people debate better. So if you debate badly, then we'll give you constructive feedback, and all of the feedback we give you is always constructive. So keep that in mind. Another one, and this is a principle from judo and a lot of martial arts, is that when you are practicing with a partner, no matter what you are doing with them, always make sure that you are working towards your mutual benefit. So that's why you need to debate better. It's because everybody else in the room is also there to debate better. And if there's one person who's slacking off and not contributing to the round, that hurts everybody else in the room as well. So it's kind of reminding yourself that, right, I'm here to also help other people learn. Even if I'm a total novice, even if I speak for 30 seconds and have to sit down, you're still helping the other people in the room engage with debate and do it better. So keep that in mind. And another one is, again, coming back to that constructive criticism. Always learn from your mistakes. You're going to make a lot of them. I made a lot of them. The difference between when I started being mediocre at debate to starting being really good at debate was really internalizing that making mistakes is okay, making mistakes is great, as long as I am learning from them after the rounds. And I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So are there any questions? Just starting out. The reason why I have cute animal pictures up front is because there's actually a kawaii effect that was proven by a Japanese university. Looking at pictures of cute baby animals increases your attention. Pretty neat survival stuff. So in terms of some terminology that debaters are going to use, constructive arguments. These are building up your own side. These are the arguments that you would make in a thesis. These are the arguments you would make in a social studies or business or English assignment, things like that. They are things that further your own argument, your own hypothesis, your own belief about this issue, or your team's belief about this issue. One of the most important parts of that is choosing a perspective, something that you really care about, that you want to center all of your arguments around. So in a unionization round, talking about the rights of laborers and the rights of workers could be your thing. That thing that unifies all of your arguments together that you can keep on referring back to. Something that your team can really own and hold on to. Finding those issues is going to make your constructive analysis really awesome. The next is clash or refutation or rebuttal, and those are all synonyms of one another. And this is attacking the other side. So this is showing logical problems with their arguments, showing why they're wrong, showing why their arguments don't matter. All the tactics that you can think of to make their arguments stop working so that their constructive falls apart while yours is still there. Obviously, the other teams are going to be clashing with your arguments as well, and that's where we bring in the term called reconstructive material. So that's, you examine, this is what my partner said, this is what they said against it, and this is why that didn't work. This is why we're still right. This is why their clash wasn't effective. This is one of the great opportunities for what we call comparative analysis. So really showing the two teams side by side and showing where they differ. Because that differentiation is one of the most important parts of debating. To show, again, this is where we stand, this is how our positions are different, is one of the really powerful techniques you have to make yourselves stand out as a team. And that'll come up again later. Summary is the very end of the round, though other speakers in the round can do it, and we'll introduce the strategy about that at later meetings. So this is identifying what was important in the round and bringing it back in. So the final speech that we'll get into is called the summary speech, because what we want you to do is go through everything that happened in the round and tell it like you saw it. Not how it factually happened necessarily, but what were the strong arguments that really stuck around? What were the weak arguments that got totally demolished? And use that to show how your team has won the debate as a result. Because hopefully all of the strongest arguments came from your partner who spoke before you. The final piece of terminology is style. And this is one of the things that is really difficult to talk about in debate because we don't put a lot of emphasis on style in terms of how you are judged in winning rounds. But it does matter. We do want to help you develop the skills to present your arguments clearly and make them compellingly. So this has things to do like vocabulary, terminology, word choice, but also just do your arguments have logical flow? Do they transition easily from one to the next? One of the really easy but really cheesy ways of doing this is something we call signposting. So this is making it explicitly clear when you're moving from topic 1 to topic 2 to topic 3 to really give your arguments even really artificial structure, being like, I'm going to make my first arguments about why unions are an awesome idea. That first argument is this. You go through your argument. My second argument about why unions are awesome is argument number 2. Doing that will help give your speeches flow. It'll help the judges understand and remember what you said. And that structure is what we're looking for primarily out of style when people are first starting to debate. Next, we want to look at BP. This is actually getting into the nuts and bolts of how debate is going to work. So a BP round is going to start out by you receive your position in the round, you receive the motion, you prep the motion, you debate, you remain engaged in the round, you get judged, and then you learn stuff. So we're going to go through that and walk you through sort of the process. Getting the resolution. So the first thing about getting a resolution is don't panic. You are oftentimes going to get resolutions with proper nouns you don't know very much about, topics you don't know very much about, things that you just think are way over your head. Don't panic. You know more than you think. So, in your prep time, first start with things that you know, especially if it's a foreign topic. Get down all of the stuff that you think is important for this round. We're going to give other seminars on some prep strategies that we've developed as we've gone through debate from some of the experienced people. Then, once you have what you know down on paper, go into the things that you can guess, things that you can assume, things that you are kind of not quite sure of but think you could probably sell, and trust yourself to be able to sell those things. They don't have to be right, they don't have to be perfectly true, and as long as everybody is playing ball with the understanding that none of us have researched very thoroughly for these topics, usually it's not a big problem. Then, once you've got down sort of your knowledge base, start to make your arguments and put all those things that you know together and how you want to sell them to your judges. One of the most important things for prep time is communication with your partner. Be talking to them all the time. Even if you are a complete novice and you don't know anything about debating, I can guarantee you that you know valuable things that you will be able to contribute to the round. Guaranteed. Don't let being paired up with a pro or someone with lots of experience or who's really charismatic stop you from contributing to that prep discussion, because like we said, team cohesion is one of the most important parts of debating. You can't be a cohesive team if only one person is giving the arguments. So help yourself, help them, help everybody else, and use that prep time to talk to your partner and make your arguments together as a team. This is what the round looks like. So there are in total 8 speakers that are going to happen in a BP round. They are divided up into 2 benches. So you have the proposition bench and the opposition bench. And these 2 sides are vaguely arguing for the same side. But it's important to remember that there are actually 2 different teams on each of these benches. So you have the front half teams at the top and the back half teams at the bottom. They are all competing against each other, but teams on the same bench can't contradict each other. We'll get into how they then win against one another a bit later. All of the speaking times are 5 minutes long. You have 30 seconds at the beginning of your speech that are called protected time. You make yours, and then 30 seconds at the end that are also protected. That's against points of information that we'll get into later. As sort of the general flow of the round, the Prime Minister speaks first, then the Leader of the Opposition, then the deputies, then the ministers, then the government whip, and the opposition whip. And you don't need to remember the names of those positions, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But it is important to know where you are in terms of fulfilling your role in the round, because each speech does do different things. So starting out with the Prime Minister, you are sort of the introduction to the round. So when you stand up as the Prime Minister, you want to do a couple of things. First, you want to set up your team's hypothesis. You want to set up what your team is going to try and prove today. So largely that's what happens in the resolution, but you will sometimes need to add a little bit more detail to what that means, exactly what you want to be debating. And making a good hypothesis is something that's going to help you in all of your courses. It's one of the great educational opportunities of debate, is that we are going to be making you do hypotheses every time you come to practice. You're also going to set up some context for the round. This is incredibly important. For anyone who saw me in the demo debate, one of the first arguments that I made is, why do we care about this issue? And I think it's one of the first arguments that anybody should be making from a Prime Minister's speech. Why does this matter? What is the relevance and impact of this issue? That's something that is super important to lay out. The next thing is your context and your worldview. So what is that position that you're always going to be coming back to? What is that thing that unifies your team? And it doesn't have to be like a deep philosophical position. You don't have to like take on a huge philosophical burden like saying we're taking it from the Marxist perspective or something. It can be something fairly small. Just like, who do we care about? What is our big issue? And always relate back to that. Then you're going to develop your arguments and end with a strong conclusion. One of the biggest challenges of being a prime minister in a debate is that you speak first, and then there's going to be 35 minutes of other people speaking after you. To be remembered, leave time and take the effort to make a good, solid conclusion to your speech. And that's going to help you out immensely as a prime minister. Another thing that a lot of people sort of mess up when they're talking about prime minister speeches is that they say that you're there to set up the round, that you're almost there as an observer or as a third party to the round. You are there to win. You are still an active participant in the round. Your objective is to set up a good round, obviously, because that is the best way for you to win. So always emphasize that when you're doing prime minister speeches. You're not just there as the introduction to the round. You are there as an active participant trying to win. And that will help you out and make this position a lot more difficult or a lot easier than it seems. The leader of the opposition does pretty much the exact same thing for the opposition bench. In British parliamentary especially, we put a very high burden on opposition to have a constructive stance as well. So you can't just go, no, they're wrong, no, they're wrong, no, they're wrong, no, they're wrong, no, they're wrong. You also have to prove why you're right. So you're doing the same thing. You're setting up an opposition thesis, opposition context, opposition worldview, developing opposition arguments, and then also clashing with the prime minister. So there's a little bit less of a constructive burden, but just because you have to clash with the speaker before you. But we're still looking for you to have a case for opposition, a reason why we should vote for you, not just a reason why we shouldn't vote for the other team. Again, also, you're still at the beginning of the round. It's still important to have a really strong conclusion here. The deputy prime ministers and deputy leader of the opposition are pretty much the same. Here is where team cohesion, following your partner's line and continuing their argument is super important, because that's basically your special role in the round. But otherwise, you provide any constructive arguments that your partner didn't, you clash, you refute, you reconstruct. Fairly normal. The extension speakers begin the back half, and so the way that they differentiate themselves from the front half is that they give us a new idea. They bring something new and different to the round. So you want to pick a different context. You want to pick a different worldview. You want to make brand new arguments, things that the round hasn't seen yet. And what this means is that you are looking for arguments that are better, that are more relevant, and that are more exciting than the people that came before you. And that's how you beat the first team on your bench. You never contradict them. That's something we call knifing, and we penalize that very severely. So what you want to be doing is finding new ways to make the same case, argue for the same thing, but come at it from a different perspective. And that's what we're expecting from our extension speakers. We're also expecting that you clash with the other team from the front half. So if you're the extension speaker for the proposition, you are continuing the case of the proposition bench and clashing against the opposition. And the same is true for the opposition extension. They're very similar speeches. The proposition whip I want to highlight specifically as opposed to just doing both whips together, because you need to clash with the second opposition. I have lost a lot of rounds because as the second prop whip speaker, I didn't clash with second op. If no one clashes with their arguments, even if their arguments weren't very good, they are still standing completely untouched at the end of the round. And we unfortunately reward that because of the structure of how debates work. So you need to clash with your second opposition. Otherwise, you are basically handing them free points and free wins. So make sure that you are explicitly clashing with the opposition. Then you're also providing summary. So you're looking back on everything that the opposition bench said, telling us why it was wrong. You're looking at the bench or the team before you and your team, showing us why your team is better. You can group this however you want. You can go team by team. You can go through the arguments you thought were the most important. You can try and find themes and group them together. We'll have a lot more strategy sessions for these positions because they're a little bit more technical. You can kind of think of it as the conclusion of an essay. You want to restate all of the things that have already been said in a way that makes them seem super awesome and super relevant in a way that's going to make you win the round. So be in that mindset of, I am concluding the round. What would be a good conclusion that would really make my team win? The opposition whip does all of the same things, but has to clash. You're the last speaker in the round. There's nothing you can do but clash. So make sure that you're just doing that summary as the opposition whip. The last sort of like structural part of debate as it happens are called points of information. So these happen during the round. During the first 30 seconds and last 30 seconds of someone's speech, no one else can ask a POI. The way you ask a POI is you just stand up out of your chair, politely try to make as little sound as possible so that you don't interrupt their speech, and wait to be acknowledged. As the speaker, you can either allow someone to make a point of information, or you can wave them down if you're at a part of your speech where you don't want to. We do expect you, though, to take 2 points of information from the other side during your speech. So that allows them to have time to directly clash with you and demand engagement. So they can ask you a question, or they can make a statement. Either way, you have to respond to it. And obviously, in order for them to take 2 POIs, you have to be offering them. And this is one thing that novices oftentimes sort of shy away from. Make points of information. Stand up. Ask a question. It'll make you seem super awesome, like you're on the point, makes you engage in the round, and that's super awesome. So stay engaged, especially as a front half team. Points of information are the only way that you get to reinsert your material once you're done talking. So they're a great way to force a second opposition team to deal with stuff you said in the very first speech when they're trying to ignore it, and make them seem stupid as a result. So use your POIs effectively, try and make them. Another thing, keep them short. This is something that a lot of novices don't do, is that if someone is taking like 20 seconds to ask a POI, just wave them down and answer the question you think they asked. You are allowed to do that. POIs should be 10 seconds, 15 seconds at the most, because otherwise you're wasting that speaker's time. Don't let that happen to you. Wave them down if they're just going in circles or trying to make a speech instead of asking a POI. The next thing is judging, because this is important. Some of you might judge for your first round instead of debating in it, but you should all know how you are being judged so that you can better tailor your debate towards that. So judges are looking at the round holistically. There's not like a checkbox, there's not a rubric that we have for debating. We are looking for the teams that were the best on several different categories. So these are listed in the easiest to do, but the least important in our decisions. So the first one is role fulfillment. This is super easy because all you have to do is remember those things that I told you earlier and try and do those things, and you will be fulfilling your role in the round. And that's a check mark. That's something that you can just get out of the way. In terms of making your arguments coherently presented, this is sort of what we mean by style. Where it's like, did everything make sense? Did they all flow together? Was I able to follow their speech? This is a lot about structure. That'll take some practice. We'll have a whole bunch of sessions training you to improve your structure. For now, just be aspiring to get that sort of structure in your speeches. And then finally, the most difficult, but the most important, and the one that we will give the greatest weight for, is were your arguments the best? Did you have the best impact, the best relevance, the best logic, the best presence in the round as a debater and as a logician? That's what we're looking for. So that's something that you're going to learn by debating, by stealing from other people, by learning from other people. One of the things that's most important about judging, and one of the worst habits that you can develop, is whining about your results. There are a lot of people with big egos that come to debate. Probably none of you are those people. But every time that you lose, it is because you couldn't convince the judge of your position. Regardless of how right you think you are, you did not make the case compellingly to your judge. End of story. When your judge gives you feedback and says this is why you lost the round, even if you didn't see it that way, that is the way that it was presented and everybody else understood it. So as a result, take that and say, okay, how can I make my vision of how I thought the round went line up with that vision of what they are seeing? How do I debate better? Going back to that third rule. Take your losses in good stride, learn from your mistakes. And in terms of learning effectively, I also have some points for that. Pay attention when your speech is done, especially if you're one of the first speakers in the round. Don't tune out. Listen to what other people are saying, because one of the most satisfying debates, or like moments in debate, is when you debated against someone in a previous round and they made an argument, and you debate them in another round on opposing sides with a similar issue. You make the exact same argument back at them, and you just watch them squirm as they're like, I made this argument and you're stealing it from me. That's how I learn. I'm not in poli-sci or econ, I'm a microbiology student. I take science courses, I learn data and stuff. When I'm talking about issues, a lot of the stuff that I know is stolen from other people who were smarter than me back then. Now people are stealing from me because I stole all those smart things previously. So steal from everyone that you know, that's the third point. Steal from your peers, steal from your parents, steal from magazines, articles, newspapers, anything you can find. Steal their arguments, use them in debate rounds. One of the easiest ways that you can do this is to keep a debate binder or a folder or a book. I still have every single round that I ever debated in filed away in 2 notebooks sitting on my shelf, so I can always go back and refer to them whenever I have a question about a round that I had. That is a super valuable learning tool for you, especially if you're not going to every single debate meeting and not debating constantly. It's a great way to refresh your memory about what was a debate like, what are some things that I should be looking for, what are things I liked and didn't like about my speech and other people's speeches. Having that sort of proof of progress is going to help you a lot, also proving, hey, I am getting better. Look at how bad these arguments I was making last year are compared to the ones I'm making now. Those are the kinds of things that will give you the impetus to really progress in debate. It's one of the things I really think is an effective learning strategy in general. So, those are sort of the expectations and guidelines for how to debate. Do you have any questions, or do you feel prepared?
You stutter like in the middle of the speech. How do you get past that? Like when you stutter, like just stop. Yeah. You go blank. How do you go past that?
Breathe. Take a big deep breath. Take a pause if you need to. We don't worry about that. Lots of people do it. Happens all the time. Take a pause. Think. Start again. You don't even have to start from a new point. You can go back and be like, let's do that again. Let's try that a second time. Because once again, what we want is the good argument. The compelling speech helps. That's what will start separating you out from like the really good debaters to the best debaters is going to be your style and presentation. But what gets you from the beginner debater to the good debater is going to be your arguments. And that's what we want to be focusing on. Because no matter how good you are as a speaker, if your arguments aren't good, you're not getting the point of debate. So.
When you said like you could take arguments from different sources, would that somehow be considered like plagiarism?
No. So because we're not writing anything and it's understood that like we're not doing original research, we're not claiming anything that we're doing as our own, I don't really think we run into issues of plagiarism. Obviously it's nice if you can cite it, but at the same time doing the citations in debate is also the ad authoritatum fallacy. So it's like the citations are irrelevant in debate because when I say steal, it's really learn. It's learn the arguments in those newspapers and magazines so that you can deploy them yourself later on. They're still your words. They are still your thoughts. You just stole the idea from somebody else, and that's fine.
Do people ever use stats in
debates? So like we all have different knowledge bases, right? So we know things. And if you can deploy those facts and evidence that you know, that's great. One of the things that I caution about the use of statistics and facts is that the facts are irrelevant. I can lie as much as I want to debate. The important part is, do the facts make sense? Do you spin them into a story? Is there something that you learn from the use of statistics and evidence? So like I said, there's no marking rubric for debate in this style. It's not like we're going to go through, oh, they had this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence. They have more evidence than the other team, therefore they win. You can have a ton of evidence. If it doesn't make any sense, then you've still lost the round. So use facts and figures that you know sparingly. Try and debate about principles. Try and debate about things that you can prove. Because you can't prove them. You can't like pull up an academic journal and be like, no, look, it's right here. You can't do that in debate. So the facts are part of your argument. They are not the argument themselves. Cool. So yeah. You guys are a much more engaged audience. You actually asked questions. Awesome. So yeah. Other than that, we'll go back to the other room. I think they are just